College and the past president of Kerala Federation of Obstetrics and Gynecology. We have Dr. Ajit Des, who is the additional professor and head of the department of ONG at PMC Kannur. And Dr. Ajit is the current KFOG president, and he was the past vice president and joint secretary of KFOG, and past chairperson of research committee of KFOG, and the coordinator of maternal near miss review of KFOG, and past president of Kannur ONG Society. And we have Dr. Lakshmi. Dr. Lakshmi S. is the additional professor, Department of ONG, Government Medical College, Calicut, and Secretary, Calicut ONG Society during 2018 and 19. And Secretary, Calicut Menopause Society, Vice President, Calicut ONG Society, and State Trainer for Immediate Postpartum IUCD Services. And she has special interest in high-risk pregnancy management, medicine. And Dr. Mumtaz, the professor ONG, MES Medical College, Perinthilmana, and she has won many awards, Kalyanikutti Amma Memorial Gold Medal Award in AKCOG 2002, Dr. Tamban Memorial Gold Medal, AKCOG 2003, Amarendranath Dan Prize for Best NCH Paper in ASCOG Bank 2003, and KFOG President's Gold Medal in ASCOG 2019. And she is the winner of Wonder Foxin Award 2019. And Dr. Lisha Govind, she is the Associate Professor at KMCT Medical College, Calicut. And Dr. Lisha is working with Dr. Chellamma ma'am. And with this few words, invite our moderator, Dr. Chellamma ma'am, to conduct the panel discussion. Over to you, ma'am.
Okay. Hello. Hello.
Yes,
Can you see the slides? Can you see the slides?
Yeah, we can see the slides.
Okay. Good evening to all of you. We are coming to the end of this virtual CME with the panel, with the short panel only because we are very late. So today the panel is discussing mainly on the abdominal uterine bleeding during the perimenopausal age group. So we know that abdominal uterine bleeding is frequently encountered gynecological complaint in the premenopausal women, and this is the most common cause of hysterectomy in this age group also. And this may be an expression of hormonal milieu, or it could be a clinical presentation of benign or malignant female genital tract in perimenopausal age group. So the abdominal uterine bleeding may be a manifestation of underlying causes of benign or malignant disease. So coming to the figure classification, we know that the figure has classified as ongoing classification of abnormal uterine bleeding in non-gravid uterus in 2011. That the PAM as a structural cause of abnormal uterine bleeding, and the COIN part, that is the non-structural cause of bleeding. So it is introduced in 2011. Now it is revised in 2018. So the main differences are, one is in the earlier group, the noted classified, N was it was noted classified. Now in 2018 revision, it is not otherwise classified. That is one change in the system. The other one is the figure AUB system 1. That is the revision in the terminologies of the abnormal uterine bleeding, like frequency, duration, regularity, and flow volume, etc. That is one. And the other one is a figure AUB system diagnostic matrix, depending upon the presence or absence of this AUB L or P or whatever may be the ongoing classification. So with this introduction, we are going to a panel discussion. My panelists are all from medical colleges, all are medical college faculties. Already Kunjumaydin has already introduced them. Dr. Ajit Das from Kannur Medical College, Professor and HOD, additional Professor and HOD, Lakshmi from Calicut Medical College, Mundas from Perindalmanna MES Medical College, and Lisha from KMCD Medical College. So the first case is directly going to the first case, the simple case. A 45-year-old Mrs. X, she's a para 3L3 lady, presents with heavy menstrual bleeding of 6 months duration. She feels very much tired and cannot do her routine work. She has no other comorbidities. On examination, she is having pallor, and pelvic examination, there is no abnormality detected. And because of this abnormal uterine bleeding, she had undergone DNC 2 weeks back, and the report came as secretory endometrium. So, Dr. Lisha, what are the possibilities in this patient?
Madam, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, ma'am. From the given scenario, she comes under AUBE, that is endometrial, or we can put it under AUBN also, maybe some AV malformations, madam.
Why you said AUB, E or N?
Because, madam, from the examination point also, pelvic examination, there's no abnormality. There's no structural anomalies like any polyps or adenomyosis. Uterus is not seems to be normal, and she has undergone DNC, madam. It shows secretory endometrium. That means she is having an ovulatory cycle.
Having an ovulatory cycle, so she is having secretory endometrium. And on pelvic examination, there's no abnormalities detected. Uterus and adnexes are appearing normal. Okay. So how will you evaluate her?
Madam, first of all, when such a woman comes to us, we have to take a thorough history. Mainly the menstrual history, her past cycles, and in the present cycle, whether she has a regular or irregular cycle, and what is the frequency and duration of her cycle, what is the amount of bleeding, whether she's having any passing of clots, and whether it is associated with any dysmenorrhea. And medication history is also very important, madam, because certain drugs can cause heavy menstrual bleeding, especially anticoagulants, certain antipsychotics, antihypertensives, and steroids, all these. So history is very important.
So when the patient is on anticoagulant, etc., that comes as under AUB?
C.
AUB, C.
Coagulant.
And iatrogenic also.
Iatrogenic also. Drugs. Iatrogenic. Okay. Then we have to thoroughly examine the woman, because according to this, she has pallor. We have to look for signs of anemia. Then the woman may be obese. Obesity is one of the cause of anovulation, which may lead to AUB. And we have to rule out PCO also. PCO is also one of the reasons, ma'am. Then we have to look for signs of hirsutism and check the thyroid, because hypothyroidism causes anovulation and bleeding, and galactorrhea. Breast also has to be examined, because galactorrhea can cause AUB.
So what are the blood investigations we have to do?
Blood investigations basically starting from complete blood count, madam, hemoglobin, hematocrit, and platelet, because we have to look for the degree of anemia also. And sometimes leukemia may be one of the reasons for bleeding in these women. And next, the peripheral blood smear also can be seen, madam. Then blood group and RH typing. Thyroid function test, as I said, hypothyroidism may be one of the reasons. Then liver function test and renal function test, because these dysfunctions can cause dysregulation of the HPO axis and cause AUB. Then serum prolactin and FSH and LH, because menopausal transition also in this period, women may have AUB, and serum ferritin to know the iron stores.
So in this case, as you said, it is very important to do the complete blood investigations. And also another most important thing is the thyroid function test, because both can produce abnormal uterine bleeding. And serum ferritin, why? Serum ferritin?
The iron stores, madam, because she is already pale. She is having heavy menstrual bleeding since 6 months. She will be anemic.
So she is anemic. So in this case, patient cannot do routine work because of the anemia. So in this case, the serum ferritin should also be estimated. What is the next investigation you have to do?
Next is ultrasonogram. Both transabdominal as well as transvaginal sonography has to be done, madam. We have to exclude mainly pelvic pathologies like polyp, leiomyoma, adenomyosis, and any ovarian pathologies. And very important is to measure the endometrial thickness.
So of course, you have to do the ultrasound. That is the ultrasound that is made. The best is transvaginal ultrasound, so that you can see the abnormalities, adnexes, etc. very clearly, close because the probe is very close to the adnexa and the uterus. So, and also you can rule out the polyp, leiomyoma, adenomyosis, etc. because of the palm or structural cause of abnormal uterine bleeding. And the most important thing is you can measure the endometrial thickness. It is very, very important. So, what about the endometrial evaluation?
Endometrial evaluation should be done in, according to FIGO, madam, any woman of more than 40 years with heavy menstrual bleeding, or any woman of more than 35 years with anovulatory cycles, or if she is obese, hypertensive, or diabetic, or if she was on tamoxifen therapy, or previous history of colon or breast cancer. All these women should have endometrial study. And when endometrial thickness is more than 12 millimeter, irrespective of the day of the cycle, we have to go for endometrial evaluation. Then we can differentiate ovulatory and anovulatory AUD. We can know the histological type of the endometrium. We can exclude endometritis, especially tuberculosis, and we can exclude hyperplasia as well as carcinoma of the endometrium.
So what will you prefer to do the endometrial evaluation? Which method you prefer?
Actually, pipal aspiration is better, madam, because it's an office-based procedure. It's cheap. There's no need of any inpatient admission or no need of any anesthesia. But greater chance of false negative is seen with pipal aspiration.
Yes, that is very important. So sometimes you may miss area and there is false negative, but it is more advantageous to that it can be done in the OP and there is no anesthesia, etc. is needed. And patient acceptance is also very good. And how will you manage this patient?
In this patient, madam, actually, we can start with non-hormonal therapy. We can start with, first we have to restore the ions because she's having anemia. Depending on the blood, you have to aim is to decrease the blood loss, correct anemia, and improve the quality of the life, madam. Then depending on the severity of the anemia, we can either give oral iron or parenteral iron, or blood transfusion can also be given. Then to control the bleeding, we can start with non-hormonal therapy, that is NSAIDs, preferably mefenamic acid, as we all use, 250 to 500 milligram 8 hourly for 3 to 5 days, which is better compliance, but only 20 to 40% decrease in blood loss is seen. But certain patients may have nausea, vomiting, gastritis, all these with NSAIDs. Or we can go for antifibrinolytics like tranexamic acid, which can be given either oral or IV. 500 milligrams.
So in severe bleeding, you have to give IV tranexamic acid. How much will you give?
1 gram. 500 milligram to 1 gram we can give QID or 4 times a day for 3 to 5 days, madam. Antifibrinolytics are better actually compared to NSAIDs because it decreases blood loss by 50%. But certain thromboembolic episodes may occur as a side effect.
Okay. So in this case, this patient is mildly better with your oral iron therapy. Now she can do routine work or parenteral iron or whatever may be the method of anemia is corrected, and the bleeding also slightly controlled. She comes after 3 months with difference in her bleeding pattern. Slight difference is there. What will you do next?
Now we have to move on to the hormonal therapy, madam. We can start with progesterone actually. Oral progesterone can be given either medroxyprogesterone acetate 2.5 to 10 milligram daily, or norethisterone 5 to 10 milligram daily starting from day 5 to 25 of the cycle. If she's having acute bleeding, we can actually start with a higher dose, 10 milligram 6 hourly for 24 to 48 hours. Once bleeding stops, we can taper the dose to 10 milligram thrice a day, then twice a day, and for a total dose of 21 days. This we can continue for 3 to 6 cycles. Or we can...
So these are the oral progesterones now we are giving routinely. There is a methoxyprogesterone acetate and norethisterone acetate. So which is having a hemostatic effect. So it is very useful to control the bleeding. Norethisterone acetate. So in that case, she can have this progesterone into 3 to 6 cycles. So the other thing is the Depo-Provera. It can also be given. What problems will be the if you are giving
irregular
what will you give?
Irregular spotting will be there, madam, and some osteoporosis can also occur.
So,
you have to supplement
prolonged therapy, osteoporosis can occur, and there may be, and the water retention, the weight gain, etc. May be that because of the progesteronic side effects. What about any other treatment methods?
We can go for combined OC pills, low dose pills, madam, which is also very good. It reduces blood loss by 60%. Dose and starts from day 5 to day 25 of the cycle only. For 3 to 6 cycles, we can use it. or selective estrogen receptor modulator, SERMs, or meloxicillin can also be given, madam. That is, dose to 60 milligram twice a week for 12 weeks, then taper the dose to 60 milligram once a week for 12 weeks. And better is LNG IUCD, which decreases blood loss, which causes amenorrhea as such, which can be retained for 5 years.
So in this case, the patient is a young patient having regular heavy menstrual bleeding with no adnexal pathology or no endometrial pathology. Only thing is the endometrial evaluation was also normal. So in this case, you have to go for all the evaluation, especially the blood initiation, because she is anemic, and also you have to evaluate the endometrium by PPLA and also do an ultrasound, and also rule out all the structural cause of ongoing classification of abnormal uterine bleeding, and then you can go for with the non-hormonal treatment first and then hormonal treatment. Any other points to be added by other panelists? Anybody else you want to add anything?
Madam, I think I have a different approach to this case because she is a 45-year-old para 3, and from the history itself, you think that it's a AUBE. So practically, I'm quite worried. Will you do FSH, LH, prolactin, all these things in this patient, because she's having regular cycles? We don't have to suspect an ovulation here. And here my first choice of treatment again will be, after doing ultrasound, will be the tranexamic acid. And if she's having dysmenorrhea, I may consider giving mefenamic acid also. And if it is not working, I won't go for a systemic progesterone because there is no progesterone deficiency here. Then I may go for a LNG IUCD. That is a better option. So that is a way, usually a practical approach we do.
Will you do a hysteroscopy before that?
Yeah, that
No,
is
hysteroscopy.
polyp is, especially after
So in
doing
this case,
ultrasound.
in this case,
I
there is
think
no
a polyp.
abnormality detected in the ultrasound, or no structural abnormalities. So, and the endometrium is also normal, ultrasound is normal. So the first thing is she is having anemia. The first of all thing is you have to, the main aim is to control the bleeding. But even though there is heavy bleeding, before giving the hormones, you have to evaluate the endometrium. That is a must.
Yeah, it's a very important thing. Evaluation of the endometrium is a very important thing.
Okay, that is the first case. Then we'll go to the second case. So here is a patient, again 46-year-old para 2 L2, having irregular periods since 1 year. Her cycles are once in 2 to 3 months with heavy bleeding, which lasts for 15 to 20 days. And she is obese and diabetic, and she is on medication for diabetes. And pelvic examination, again, cervix is healthy, uterus is bulky only, and the adnexa are free. And the ultrasound examination was done from outside, and the patient came with the report as endometrial thickness 20 millimeter. What is your diagnosis? Thus,
good evening, madam. Good evening, all. From this history, she is a perimenopausal lady with a 46-year-old who is diabetic, obese, and clinically there is no other mass palpable, and even in ultrasound, the only abnormality that is a thick endometrium. And we know, even in the secretary, we don't know at what time of the menstrual cycle the sampling was done, but even if it was done at in the secretary phase, anything more than 15 is significant.
no, it is not. Thus, it is not endometrial sampling. It is endometrial thickness
I mean,
ultrasound.
Ultrasound. Whether it is done, even if it is done during secretary phase, I mean the late phase, anything more than 15 is significant. So this patient is having significant. This patient is having significant endometrial thickening, and with this history of prolonged amenorrhea followed by heavy bleeding, it most probably is a case of anovulation. Again, supported by her age, she is perimenopausal. It is possible that she is having an ovulatory cycle, which can lead to this thickening of the endometrium.
Endometrial thickness. So in this case, the most important thing is the patient is having cycles once in 3 months only. 3 months only, and when the cycles occurs, it is the bleeding is very much high. So what are the other ultrasound findings you expect in this case? One is endometrial thickness. Other USG findings?
When we think about endometrial thickening, we think it is usually a uniform thickening, but it need not be the case always. It can be an irregular thickening, or it can be a focal area of thickening can be there, or maybe that there can be small cystic spaces can be there within the thick endometrium. And it is important that we look at the endomyometrial junction to see
Junction,
whether
very,
the
very important. We have to concentrate on the endomyometrial junction, and also the thickening. You have to see whether there is uniform thickness or focal thickening, and also you have to look at the endomyometrial junction.
And
Okay,
also,
how will you-
if we have the Doppler, we can also see the vascularity, ma'am, whether there is abnormal flow, but with high velocity flow is also significant.
Okay. Now, how will you evaluate this patient with the heavy menstrual bleeding with coming with 3 month cycle? Evaluation.
With this thick endometrium, I definitely want to know what has caused, though I presume that it could be an ovulation, there can be some other pathology also. So the first thing is to know whether what caused the thickening of the endometrium. The ideal thing to do may be hysteroscopic evaluation, but if it is not available, we can initially do a saline infusion sonography also to know whether it is really a thickened endometrium or whether it could be a polyp also. And definitely because of her age, she requires sampling of the thick endometrium, which is significantly thick, which is more than 15 millimeter. So I want to do a sampling. Depending upon the situation, we can, ideally is hysteroscopic sampling. We can directly visualize, that is the advantage. We can, if any suspicious areas there, we can take a biopsy from there. And it is easy to differentiate from the polyp. And if it is a polyp, we can do the polypectomy, and that is the end of it.
So as you said, it is very, very correct that the gold standard is hysteroscopy and the sampling of the, and also you have to rule out any intrauterine pathology, and also saline infusion sonography is also equally effective to find out. And the endometrial cytology, endometrial evaluation of the cytology should be studied. So what are things we expect in the endometrial study?
With this history, I presume there can be endometrial hyperplasia, but there can be different features. We get to see different types of endometrium even in this age group of women, like proliferative endometrium, secretory endometrium. Sometimes it is disorderly proliferative endometrium, which put us in confusion. Then we have this endometrial hyperplasia without atypia, with atypia, and rarely we get a case of carcinoma also.
So that is very true that in this type of patients, and the patient is obese, and also there is diabetes, she is on that treatment for diabetes, there is very high chance of the endometrial histology coming as the hyperplasia with or without atypia. So the revised classification of the WHO classifications, earlier we know that it was cystoglandal hyperplasia, formless hyperplasia, etc. So the revised classification, WHO classified in 2015 as endometrial hyperplasia with atypia or without atypia. That is the only new classification. So we have to follow this classification. Depending upon this, we have to go for the evaluation and the management. So this slide shows the histopathology showing hyperplasia without atypia and with atypia. So what are the management options in this patient?
My first concern is always to rule out malignancy, madam, because of her age, her obesity, diabetes, and the thick endometrium. My first concern is to rule out malignancy. Then once malignancy is ruled out, also she needs other supportive therapy because of heavy menstrual bleeding. She would have become anemic. That has to be addressed.
And before that, Bundas, there is a study that in this case, without atypia, the chance of, we are all worried about the chance of becoming endometrial cancer. So this, in this case, the hyperplasia without atypia, there is only less than 1% chance of becoming endometrial CA. So in this case, this study shows that the WHO says that reassurance is essential, but follow-up is necessary. So coming to the management options, as you said, it is the first option. Always, it is very, very important to rule out malignancy. Okay, continue.
Then we have to address the other problems like diabetes, hypertension, correction of anemia is important. And for symptomatic relief of just to relieve the bleeding, initially we can try a tranexamic acid or mefenamic acid. I would give her or consider hormones only after I get the histopathology report.
Histopathology.
Yes, yes, ma'am. And if it
So,
is
again,
requires a long-term treatment. without atypia. With atypia, definitely at this stage, with atypia, she is for a candidate for hysterectomy.
And what about LNG IUD, IUS?
Yes, ma'am. If she is having endometrial hyperplasia without atypia, that means
So
she
it's very,
requires
very important, only without ATPA.
without atypia. Yeah. She means a long-term therapy, long-term use of progestins to decrease the estrogenic effect. Because she is hypertensive, diabetic and obese, systemic progestins are less good for her. LNG IUS is better. And also when you look at the regression rates are better with LNG IUS than it is with oral progestins. When you look at the regression rate of endometrial hyperplasia. So taking both into consideration, LNG IUS is the best option for her.
Best option.
If
So
she
what
can
about,
afford or she is not
so
with
it should be given continuously. What about the other progesterone, oral progestogens?
we can give our usual 19 or testosterone derivatives, that is levonorgestrel, which is having some of androgenic property. And because of the androgenic property, they are more hemostatic. And so they are the best ones to arrest the bleeding. When the patient comes with heavy bleeding, if you want to arrest the bleeding, that is a better choice. But when you want to continue the therapy for a period of 6 months or so, because of this same reason that they have androgenic property, they have a bad impact on the lipid metabolism, and this patient looks like a candidate with metabolic syndrome. So definitely we have to switch over to another progesterone, which is 17-hydroxy, which is usual one we use is metroxyprogesterone.
So the thing is that you have to give it continuously. So this is the study showing the effect of LNG IUS on endometrial hyperplasia. So it is found to be very effective, and this Cochrane data analysis shows that it is very effective, and it is an alternative in treating women with atypical hyperplasia versus surgery. And Mundas, what is the role of surgery in this patient? Hysterectomy, any role?
Ma'am, that is a difficult question to answer because initially itself you told it is only without atypia. But maybe we have to be very sure that it is without atypia, because we have had some cases where the histopathology report was secretory endometrium, and we went ahead with a hysterectomy because the patient was having so much of bleeding and could not be adequately controlled with the progestins, and the histopathology report was endometrial carcinoma. I've had experience the other way around also. My own friend, she presented with endometrial hyperplasia with atypia. I did a hysterectomy. It turned out to be secretory endometrium. So
it is important that even though it is a typical hyperplasia without atypia, this patient should be followed up. And in this case, suppose it is coming as without endometrial hyperplasia with atypia, and there is a patient is very high risk for CA endometrium because she is obese and also she is having diabetes. So there is no chance for developing CA endometrium. So we have to consider so many factors. And you have to, as you said earlier, this is a difficult question. That is why I particularly put that question to you. So anyway, you have to think of so many factors and then take a decision for hysterectomy. But very important that if the patient is having endometrial hyperplasia with atypia, with the risk factors, then better go for hysterectomy. That is a surgical management. Thank you, Mumtaz. And now we will go to the next case. That is another case. She's a 42-year-old para-1 L1 lady, presents with congestive dysmenorrhea and irregular vaginal bleeding since 4 months. And again, she is also having mild pallor, and pelvic examination shows enlarged uterus of 12 week size. What are the possibilities? Please answer it. What are the possibilities? Lakshmi, sir.
Yeah, good evening. Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Now, here's a 42-year-old lady with irregular bleeding. This symptom needs a little clarification as to whether the cycles are irregular or whether she has intermenstrual bleeding. Anyway, I'll keep the options open. And because it's a case of irregular bleeding, I would want to rule out cervicovaginal lesions by a speculum examination before I go on to evaluate the uterus and the adnexa. And because there is a modest enlargement in the size of the uterus to about 12 weeks, I would keep the possibilities of adenomyosis, leiomyoma. And
why do you want to do a specular examination?
You have mentioned that she has irregular vaginal bleeding. So
yeah.
it could
very
be
important. Very
because
correct.
many a time we find that a speculum examination is often skipped and straight away a focal condition is missed. So I want to highlight that point. And also in my bimanual pelvic examination, if the uterus is also tender, then I would give adenomyosis as my first priority.
Why? Because the patient is having congestive dysmenorrhea also.
Congestive dysmenorrhea as well. So these are my possibilities. And definitely a polyp can also be considered because irregular bleeding is one of the most important symptoms. And these estrogen dependent conditions can often coexist also. So only my evaluation will give me a clear picture.
So here there is a possibility of structural abnormality. Okay, that is the either it can be because it is 12 size, it can be an adenomyoma, it can be a polyp also because irregular bleeding, and also it can be a leiomyoma. Okay, how will you evaluate this patient?
So as I've already mentioned, because she's a 42-year-old lady and has only one child, any woman in the reproductive age group, one has to rule out a pregnancy-related.
It's very, very important. Ambuja madam has already highlighted that a pregnancy test should be done when the patient comes with bleeding,
so
even though the patient is old.
Urine
Very, very good, very good.
And only proceed with the other investigations. So if the cycles are irregular, I would also want to do a hormonal profile, including a hemogram, because you said she's also anemic, so I would want to assess the degree of severity of anemia. The next most important non-invasive investigative tool would be a 2D ultrasound, a transvaginal ultrasound. And this would definitely reveal the myometrial lesions, whether it's an adenomyosis or whether it's a leiomyoma, and also would throw light on the cavity and the endometrial thickness. Now, a word about the role of transvaginal ultrasound. The MUSA criteria, the morphologic ultrasound sonographic assessment criteria, have laid down about 7 to 8 conditions, criteria for the diagnosis of adenomyosis. It has only about 70 to 80% sensitivity. So coupling with Doppler, this might increase the sensitivity in differentiating between leiomyoma and adenomyoma. To simplify it, if it's a leiomyoma, it's a peripheral vascularity, and if it's an
but also you have to see the endomyometrial junction.
Yes, definitely. Endomyometrial, the junctional zone is very clearly delineated. So that would be picked up at a better rate if one goes in for a 3D ultrasound or an MRI, because the myometrial lesions would be better delineated by the other. And the sensitivity rate would also be increased to more than 90%. And also you have the added advantage of going in for a fibroid mapping if one has to go for a myomectomy. Then, as I've already mentioned, because these are estrogen dependent conditions, I would definitely want to evaluate the endometrial mast cell because she is over 40 years. So an endometrial sampling is also an important part of the investigation. If a facility is available for hysteroscopy, I would go in for a direct hysteroscopy and sampling.
So that is a gold standard. That is to evaluate results. Okay, you have done all the investigations, including the pregnancy test, because she is young and she is only para 1. And you have done the ultrasound, 3D, MRI, hysteroscopy, everything.
The 3D ultrasound and MRI can be kept as optional additional investigations if we are not able to come to a conclusion.
MRI is, I think MRI is better in cases of adenomyosis, and also you want to mark the fibroid again. It's useful.
Exactly.
So, okay, you have done all the investigation. Tell us about the management options.
She's a young lady. Definitely, I would want to put her on hormonal therapy. Now, depends upon the underlying condition which we have picked up. If it's adenomyosis, then definitely an LNG IUS would be my first option, considering her age and her parity. Of course, fertility issues may not be there here anyway. And because the uterus is just modestly increased, with LNG IUS, there is a close to 70% response to the symptomatology, the symptom relief. If
symptom relief, both the dysmenorrhea and also the menstrual
bleeding, the bleeding part. Now, regarding the progestins, there are so many studies which have come up with the role of Dynagest. Continuous administration of 2 milligrams of Dynagest for long-term administration or up to 2 years can produce a significant reduction in the size of the uterine volume or the adenomyoma. And
Yes.
if she does not respond to this medical line, then I would consider going in for a minimally invasive procedure like an adenomyomectomy if it's an adenomyoma, or maybe hysterectomy would be my last option considering the age of this patient. Now,
So it is only last, as you said. Yeah, that is a 41-year-old patient. Why you want to remove the uterus?
yeah,
And,
unless
so,
of course she does not respond to these.
so
No.
what about if it is an AUBL?
Yeah, if it's a leiomyoma, again, medical management would be the first option with selective progesterone receptor modulators. We have ulipristal acetate, 5 milligram daily for about 3 months would be my first option. Maybe intermittent courses can also be given according to various trials. If she does not respond, then I may have to consider myomectomy. Again, an LNG IUS does have a role if because there is only a modest increase in the size of the uterus, and if there is no significant distortion in the uterine cavity, and if it's a type 2 leiomyoma of less than 5 centimeter, they say LNG IUS can be a good option for these women as well. So again, there is a role
But the uterine cavity is distorted, the chance of
expulsion will be more, and it may not be efficacious. Of course, the other conservative modalities are always there in advanced centers, UAE and HIFU, which are options both for adenomyosis and leiomyoma these days.
And in case of polypectomy?
Yeah, as Mumtaz has already mentioned, if it's a polyp, only because these are estrogen-dependent conditions and with irregular bleeding, if the diagnosis is straightforward on hysteroscopy, then I would go in for a hysteroscopic polypectomy. So
again, all these 3 cases, there is an option for management with LNG IUS. So here is another report, the study coming with the report that is very much effective in cases of symptomatic adenomyosis. So it is suitable alternative option for medical management of heavy menstrual bleeding and dysmenorrhea prior to hysterectomy in patients with large adenomyosis. So this LNG IUS has a role in not these 3 cases we have discussed, that is for the control of bleeding and also the better correction of anemia, etc. So with this, we will go to the next case, that is a case 4, and that is a Mrs. K, 48 years, para 2, had breast cancer treatment 2 years back and is on tamoxifen therapy now. And she was on regular follow-up, no menstrual complaints for her. On routine evaluation, the ultrasound showed endometrial thickness of 9 millimeter. So her medical oncologist has sent you for opinion, and she gives history of hot flushes also. So Dr. Ajit, what do you think about the relation with the tamoxifen and the endometrial thickness?
Madam, this patient actually has regular periods, isn't it?
Yeah.
Her menstruation, everything is normal. Such a patient actually, we don't have to worry about this endometrial thickness of say 6 millimeter, isn't it? Just 6 millimeter. So actually, premenopausal patients actually, even if you give tamoxifen, since the estrogen level is more, it does not have much antagonist action on the endometrium. So there is no need for any actually screening for endometrial malignancy or anything in this patient. Even postmenopausal patient also, if she is postmenopausal also, even the ultrasound screening for the endometrial cancer is not recommended now, because tamoxifen itself causes endometrial thickness, and actually more than 50% had a thickness of more than 8 millimeter. And when there is a thickness, actually we do tend to do more of endometrial this biopsy, and actually it causes more invasion without any benefit to the patient.
So tamoxifen can produce changes in the endometrium, maybe thickened, irregular, cystic or subendometrial cysts, or even endometrial polyp.
The large polyp can occur. All these things are actually benign.
MRI also shows some changes, cytoplasmic changes, but histological changes, what histological changes you get? Histology changes, suppose you send the histology, endometrium for histological changes.
Yeah, in the premenopausal women, mostly it is a it's a proliferative activity. But yeah, postmenopausal patients can cause the C. endometrium when tamoxifen is used in the postmenopausal patient. So there is again a 2 to 7 times higher chance of C. endometrium. But unfortunately, we don't have any screening for that.
Yeah.
But we should be very careful about any bleeding. If she develops bleeding, immediately she needs endometrial study.
So here the patient is sent to you for opinion. What advice will you give? The medical oncologist has sent the patient to you because after seeing the endometrial thickness of 6 millimeter.
I will definitely tell her that there is an increased chance of C. endometrium for her. You should be very watchful, but at present you don't have any problem. If there is any irregular bleeding or any intermenstrual bleeding, or if she goes into postmenopausal period, postmenopausal bleeding, she needs further evaluation.
So exactly. In this case, the patient is not having any complaints. Even though the oncologist has sent to you for opinion, as the patient is not having any symptoms at all, and there is low risk is there without any symptoms. So in case of premenopausal women. So in this case, you have to counsel the patient, but she needs follow-up. And the most important thing is that you have to advise the patient to come for checkup or the review if there is any abnormal bleeding or vaginal bloodstream discharge or even spotting. So that is the most important advice you have to give the patient. But at present, for this patient, no intervention is needed.
But she is having hot flushes, madam, isn't it?
So in this case, she is having. But another question: she is having irregular spotting after 2 months. We told that there is no need to interfere now, but the patient comes with irregular spotting after 2 months. Then what to do?
Then definitely we need to
evaluate.
Study it. Just like any other patient coming to you with a intermenstrual bleeding, we need to evaluate.
So in this case, definitely you have to go for endometrial evaluation. Whatever may be the method, SIS or hysteroscopy or pap smear, also you have to go evaluate her, and depending upon the finding, and then you have to take a decision for this patient. Yes, so this patient, in this case, depending upon the LNGIOS or hysterectomy, whatever may be. So in the history, initial history itself, the patient gives history of management of hot flushes. How to manage it is again a controversial issue. President Madam has already mentioned about that. And the management of hot flushes in a cancer patient who is on tamoxifen.
Actually, Madam has discussed about how to manage the role of menopausal hormone therapy. She mentioned that the CA breast is a contraindication for starting hormone therapy. But we do have different options here. One of the things is lifestyle modification, then risk factor reductions. Then the role of phytoestrogen, again, is a controversial thing because if it is effective, it is an estrogen already. Then this selective serotonin receptor inhibitors like venlafaxine is a very useful drug, especially for the hot flushes. And another very useful drug is oral gabapentin, 300 milligram, 3 times daily. Then role of tibolone, again, tibolone is not contraindicated in patients with CA breast. So it's a controversial thing. You can consider giving tibolone 2.5 milligram daily.
So the tibolone liberal study itself is not, they showed that it is showing proliferation of the breast tissue, but the latest STEM study shows there is no effect on breast proliferation. But there is no actual study of tibolone on CA breast patients on tamoxifen. So I have searched for several studies, but no studies were put. The best thing, I think, better advice lifestyle changes and there is reducing factors, and also if there is any, it is not controlled with that, there are a lot of options, and oral gabapentin is a better option.
Latest study, tibolone is contraindicated for carcinoma breast patients. Please, you have to correct yourself. You should not prescribe tibolone for cancer breast treated patients. This is the study that is being done and proved. You should not use tibolone.
You should not use tibolone, but
because I cannot tell the exact reference I can send you, but it is about a long study it is being done and it is proved.
Liberalized studies, how many studies are there? But
Yeah.
there is no study
Actually,
to say
these
that
patients responds to venlafaxine or a gabapentin. So
Yeah,
we
that
don't
you
have to most
can,
of
that you
that
can
may be
use it,
better.
Yeah.
not the Tebalon.
Okay. So in this case, better not to give Tebalon to this patient for management of hot flushes. So you can advise lifestyle changes and also reduce the risk factors. And gabapentin is a better option, I think. I don't know it is available. I have no personal experience. Madam, what is your opinion? Gabapentin have you given? Ambuja madam?
Yes, yes, it works.
It's available, madam.
Actually,
Gabapentin is available.
venlafaxine is a good drug. Venlafaxine is a better drug than gabapentin because of the complications that are more with the gabapentin. Venlafaxine is a better drug. Actually, outside all the psychotherapists, they are using only venlafaxine.
Okay. Okay, madam. So clonidine, all are given.
Yes, Dr. Ambuja is very right. Venlafaxine is better drug. It is FDA approved drug for the heart flashes. Gabapentin also works.
That's all
Well.
given in hot flushes in all general patients. But the problem is in CA breast with on tamoxifen. What is the ideal drug? That is a controversial thing.
Difficult
I
to
think
take
they are the
medicine,
best,
but
better alternate therapies.
SSRI is option.
Yeah,
Yes, SRIs, they are the better alternate therapies.
no.
Correct.
Alternative therapy is only our exercise and other drugs. That's all. No
Yeah, lifestyle
lifestyle modifications is the best.
modifications. Lifestyle modifications.
Okay. So that is so that's very good discussion in this case. So with that, we are coming to the summary. So this like figure has come up with the 2018 modification. Foxy also has come up with the
See, we are talking so much, but you ask any patient who had any cancer anywhere, definitely will not take
estrogen.
hormones,
Estrogen
any other
therapy.
drug, I tell you. And it is only the lifestyle modification. I don't know about other experts. I'll see. Until now, nobody has accepted
Yoga.
either hormones or drugs for the patient who is treated with the any cancer, except for the vaginal creams.
Yes.
Nobody has accepted.
Yes.
We may talk 100 things, but still they are not accepting anything. That is the truth.
Okay. So
that
anyway,
is the truth. And many times, you know, at times, not many times, we get such kind of patients. I just want to give one example. I had one patient, rheumatoid arthritis to start with. Then she had the CA breast, took tamoxifen. She had endometrial CA. Then she went for hysterectomy, bilateral salpingo-oophorectomy. And then now she comes for strong vasomotor symptoms. What to do?
Meditation.
So, yeah. So the alternate therapies, you can't give anything.
Yoga. But rheumatoid arthritis, joint pain, etc.
Yes, rheumatoid, CA breast, CA endometrium.
Okay. Anyway, that is a
And
good discussion.
now the vasomotor
We will
symptoms.
come to
The
the
patient, I think venlafaxine you tried, madam.
yeah.
Have you tried
Yeah,
venlafaxine? That may be a good option because it is antidepressant
alternate
also.
therapies.
It may work.
That's what we try. We don't think of MHT in such cases.
Venlafaxine and oxybutynin, I don't know the oxybutynin, effect of oxybutynin.
It is also is there, but again, they are all, you know, side effects are there, sedatives.
Yeah.
That is the problem because many of these drugs, they are all sedatives, whether venlafaxine or oxybutynin. That's again another problem to give for a long time. So it is the alternative therapies only are useful for that.
Also better. So finally, at the end of the discussion, we will come back to alternative therapy, but that is the lifestyle changes and yoga, etc.
But isoflavones also are not preferable because of the thromboembolic complications that may occur with that because it's not proved.
Yeah, phytoestrogens, even then you have no studies that it is indicated, cancer patients, we don't have studies.
So
See,
otherwise
it's a
also,
estrogen now, whether it is coming from the plant or from the animal, if it is a estrogen, it has some side effect.
it has some side effect. If it
Strawberry is
it has
extra
good
from
effect, it
Not
will have
only
some side
estrogen
effect.
side effects, it is the thromboembolic complications which is more prevalent with isoflavones.
So otherwise also with alternate therapies, we do not have much studies available. Much data is not
No
available.
randomized
We-
control
yes.
trials are
So
done.
we cannot give them for a longer period.
And all our 10-week studies, 15-week studies like that only.
It's
Yes,
not
yes.
sufficient.
No
Not
longer
sufficient.
studies
Not
that are there.
Not sufficient to come for a
Yeah.
final
Yeah.
outcome.
Okay.
But it's a very good discussion, Chalama.
Anyway,
You done a
one
very
more
good
thing,
job.
I will conclude, madam. So this is the FOXI guideline of management of AUB. So it is all together, that is a ongoing, here it is given as AUBC, AUBN, etc. And also each one of it is. And again in young rule of the structural anomalies AUB, A, L or P, and also depending upon the investigations. So to come to the take home message. So AUB, abnormal uterine bleeding in the perimenopausal age group, is very common. So you have to take a detailed history of each patient and do the evaluation method properly and come to the diagnosis and treat accordingly. And for all these type of patients, the LNG IUD is a better option in all types of this AUB in the perimenopausal age group, especially if the patient wants contraception.
Yeah, even in the practice, nowadays people are very much opting for the LNG IUD.
So I thank all my panelists. You have done very well and you supported me very well. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for the organizers, Sambuja Madam and Sudha Madam, for giving these opinions, and also all the delegates who are hearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Madam.
And good night. Nice to meet you all.
Thank
Good
you.
day
And
to you all.
congrats, Calicut. Continue to keep
Thanks, Shobna. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Please don't
Thank
leave.
you,
Lakshmi,
everyone.
vote of thanks. Lakshmi waiting
don't
for
leave.
your vote of thanks.
Yeah.
I'm
So
just
with this,
going to hold
we would
you
like
all
to
back
thank
for a couple of seconds.
I should personally,
we would like to
panel-
thank
Lakshmi.
ma'am and all the panelists.
as a panelist, I should personally thank Chalama Madam for being with us today in spite of a very big sorrow, personal sorrow to her. In
What
this
happened? What happened?
Madam lost her brother.
due to
Oh, I'm sorry, Chalama.
So
Sorry.
Very
Sorry.
sorry.
So sorry
Why
to
is
hear.
it because of COVID?
Yeah, madam. He was in Delhi,
Oh,
COVID
wrong.
victim.
Oh,
And he was
Lord.
not, he
Bad
was
part is
not
that
admitted in
two-
no
two
bed, no
hospitals delayed
oxygen.
admission because the oxygen was not there. So
Suddenly he
Oh,
fell off.
God.
That part of it is you can't even go and attend.
Meeting.
Dr. Chalama, salute
Yes,
to you
sir.
of this thing. In
Very
spite
sorry,
of that,
very sorry.
Really
you
sorry.
are so
We're
calm
really
and
sorry
you are
for-
conducting it. Very sad to know that.
Oh,
May
It
God
was
rest his
so
soul in
nice of her.
And she is
said, "At this
alone in
last
that room."
moment, I
Yes.
can't withdraw. That is what she
Yeah.
said.
He left us on this Monday, madam,
My God.
for 5 days back.
There's so much to learn from her. The commitment part. My God.
That's
Amazing.
That's a great thing.
Amazing.
All prayers, madam. All prayers.
All prayers.
All prayers. And
prayers
thank
are
you
with
so
her.
much for being with us on this date. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And
Let
with this
God
topic-
give some mental strength to you. You don't know some of the things which are inevitable, not in our hands. But being doctors, we feel very sad. Lack of oxygen, somebody dying, which you cannot imagine. That's all.
Maybe our medical community should have risen to the occasion and we should have banged the politicians for keeping it ready. We also were sleeping. You cannot just blame the politicians for that. We should have, instead of when they talk something against IMA, we react. We also were sleeping, I think. All of us are responsible for what happened to one of us now. When it
We
comes
never
to
thought
you
it
only, you
can
realize
happen.
how wrong we were all.
Yes.
Now
Yes,
it's really
it is
hitting
a
me hard.
great realization now, but it is too late.
Yeah, it's too late. At
You know,
least
even
Ajita is there.
Jammu is so bad, and there is so much of scarcity. People are dying because of lack of oxygen in
Kerala
hospitals.
is that way better off. They are supplying oxygen to the other
Yeah,
states because
Kerala
they had
is
kept oxygen
much,
plants.
much better than
Jammu is
They had
pretty bad.
oxygen plants. Instead of very high corona numbers, the death rates are less because oxygen is surplus here. I think
So
that's
that
what
means
I
they have planned it very well. They have really planned it very well.
Yeah, but then next time,
But you
I
know,
hope
never
there is no
we
next time.
thought that second wave will come. That was the sad part. We never expected about the second wave. We were thinking that first wave is over. We are all very free. But this has come. So,
Madam, I would like to say in Kerala, the health sector, the health department is very alert. See, every day, even to me, even my JPHN will report all the cases, each and every cases that is reported positive. They visit the houses, they inform the people, give medicines. They are on their toes 24 hours.
I know,
And there is
Ajita,
endless phone
being a
calls.
doctor, you should do good
Yeah,
to the society. Being a
not
doctor,
to help,
I
but
think.
still they give
Yeah.
her out of all the relatives and of one patient, all the relatives and everybody keep on calling it the only JPHN in the ward. She's telling my phone is 24 hours live.
I know.
But Dr.
The
Ajita, that
department
was
is
in the
such a
papers
great
also.
work, madam.
Yeah, people
Such a
have
great
high
work.
words for this and high praise for your
Only
this thing.
only now I'm realizing how much of work they're doing every day. Every
I
day
know
the
nobody
vaccination.
realizes about the doctor's work. But
Yeah, that is the doctors also, doctors and staff all working very hard.
working very hard. Lakshmi, I think final thanks.
We will wind up. Invite Dr. Lakshmi to express the vote of thanks.
Just take a couple of minutes. My pleasure and privilege to propose a vote of thanks. At the outset, I would like to thank Ambuja Madam, our President, for your gracious presence and for your wonderful informative talk. Next, I would like to thank Prasanna Madam and Dr. Sudha Prasad again for the excellent presentation. Thank you, Dr. Sudha Sharma, for your wonderful participation. You have been your presence has been such a nice thing to be with.
Thank you.
I have no words to thank Chelama Madam at this juncture. It will be too superfluous. You've heard what has happened to her. My sincere thanks also to Shobana Madam, because they are the pillars of our society and we very much look up to them for their guidance and support. So I have no words to thank them. Let me now thank my co-panelists, Dr. Ajit, Dr. Mumtaz, and Dr. Lisha for their wonderful input in the panel. I have again no words to thank Dr. Kunjumuddin, Dr. Abdul Wahab and his team, Paul, for having taken the initiative to conceive and conduct this program in such a good manner. We have had such a wonderful attendance as well. That is what I'm told. My friend Dr. Ajita, I have no words to thank you for all your support and understanding for even making up for my inadequacies of late. Thank you so much. I must thank our academic partners, Lupin, for today's support, and Medcon India for the technical support. And last but not the least, each and every one of the viewers who have been here with us till the end, because you are the inspiration to conduct more and more such webinars. I hope all of you had a very fruitful session, and we thoroughly enjoyed having all of you together, seeing all of you after such a long time. Keep safe and have a good night. Thank you all.
Please stay safe, all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All my prayers for Chelama to bear the loss.
We have 418 registrations.
Oh, that's great.
Attendees.
That was wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Chelama, all our prayers to you. Bear this loss, and thanks a lot for this brave front that you've put. Thank you so much.
Thank you.